Welcome to the City of East Providence City Council meeting. Today is Tuesday, October 1st. May we all stand, please, for the national anthem.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can we remain standing for a moment of silence?
I ask everyone for a moment of silence for Detective Corporal Joe Tavera, who is a personal friend of mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Madam Clerk, am I getting a roll call vote?
Yes. Councilman Cahoon?
Are we taking attendance?
Attendance.
Yeah, I'm here.
Councilman Cahoon, okay. Councilman Morado?
Here.
Councilwoman Souza?
Here.
Council Vice President Rodrigues?
Here.
And Council President Brito?
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome.
Next item, please.
Next item is approval of the consent calendar for vote to council journals, regular and executive session dated September 17, 2019, and special session September 25th, 2019.
Anyone have any questions regarding the council journals at this time? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Anyone like to second that approval?
Second that motion.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morado.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrigues.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye. Next item, please.
Next item is public comment. We don't have anybody under public comment today.
Good. All right. Moving right along.
Next item is appointments, traffic appointments for vote.
If I may, through the chair.
Please.
So we had a change to the charter, as everyone knows. Recently, I believe it was November of 2017, Section 351B directly impacts how appointments function within the city. 351B states something to the effect of that the council won't make any appointments unless it's specified in the charter, that all appointments in the city are reserved for the mayor unless specified in the charter. That means that although the practice of making these traffic appointments has actually been set forth by resolution in 1980 in the city, it was amended in 88 and 91, that practice is rendered void by the charter changes in 2017. So because of Section 2-10 of the charter, which puts in penalties if any council member or the council as a whole looks to do an appointment in violation of the charter, it's my recommendation that no appointments should be made. I don't believe they can be made under the charter. Requests for appointments or nominations or recommendations to the mayor may be appropriate, but this council is without the power to directly appoint traffic appointments as a result of the amendments to Section 351B of the charter.
Mr. President, in light of Solicitor Conley's recommendation, I would withdraw this as an appointment item. Instead, I'll just send a recommendation into the mayor's office and just recommend that if the mayor's office sees fit, that they do whatever they have to do and take it from there. In the case of Mr. Pangborn, he was for 25 years a special police officer, and I'm sure he will pass muster with the mayor. He was good at it. His wife was also a special officer, but in light of the solicitor's comments, I'll withdraw it as an appointment and instead just make a recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Next item is licensing application for auto body repair shop. First Choice Auto Body Shop, 101 Pershing Street, East Providence, 02914.
Is the applicant present this evening? Or a representative from the auto body repair shop? We have all their records, all the information in place at this time?
Yes, everything's in place.
So, is there anything at the pleasure of the council? Do you have any questions or concerns or that need to be addressed?
I do not.
Okay. Like move for a vote on this then?
Mr. President, move approval.
Okay. We have a motion for approval.
Second.
And we have a second. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye. Thank you.
Next item is ordinances for first passage for vote. The first ordinance is an ordinance of the Council of the City of East Providence, ordering the assessment and collection of property tax on the rateable real estate, tangible personal property, and an excise tax on registered motor vehicles and trailers.
Just grab this.
Mr. President, if I may start with a question, and I don't know if this is better suited for Mr. Moore or the solicitor. With regard to the amount specified under Section 104, 129, 75, the ordinance is written so as to approve an amount not in excess of that. All right? I'm reading that correctly. So then the city may collect an amount up to and not in excess of that amount in tax revenue. Yes?
Yes, I believe it can be amended subsequently by request, but when you set these figures, it generally is related to, this is specific to the motor vehicles and trailers. That's subject to the weaning down of the collection of the car tax more generally.
Which is I believe, a 6-year phase out?
I believe you're correct.
Okay. I guess, Malcolm, we'll turn it over to you. I don't know if you had something to present.
No, the 104 and this number doesn't include motor vehicles. We have to present every year to municipal affairs an amount, and we normally would have, this is our maximum levy. Well, now that we're phasing out motor vehicle, municipal affairs have said, well, you don't include that anymore. So the 104 would be tangible, commercial, personal. And so this is usually what's on the back of the tax bill. It says, we're going to collect no more than this. The second paragraph talks about the assessment. When it's assessed, your quarterly payments, 25% per quarter. There's the penalty if you don't. The third paragraph is one sentence. It just talks about if it's paid by the last day, there's no interest fee charged. The next paragraph talks about the late fee. The next one is if you have a bad check or ACH and what the fee is. And then the next to last one talks about if it's not paid by March of each year, then you could be subject to the tax sale process. And this is on the back of the tax bill. Again, this is what has been presented every year for a number of years.
Malcolm, correct me if I'm wrong. Does this affect, there was an ordinance in place that gave a 7-day grace period. Does this ordinance, any verbiage around this ordinance change that or contradict that
No,
ordinance?
I think this is the one that we put in, and because that ordinance says you get a grace period. Mm-hmm. So it's never been reflected in here. I'd have to double check on that, but I think that you've put that in, and that's been sort of appended onto here, I guess you would say.
It's my understanding that each of these ordinances regarding these next 4 ordinances are boilerplate, what we do year in and year out as a portion of the budget season.
It is. It is. However, I would just make one recommendation going forward that if we can have a council person sponsor these ordinances. We don't have a sponsor on either one of these ordinances as I look through them. That would be the best thing to do. Because if there's a question or concern that could be taken care of right at that point in time, but just to put it on the agenda for a meeting going forward. I don't know how critical this is to have this for this evening, but I would.
This would be the first passage.
Okay.
You have to have two, so there's always a second one. And I can get a council sponsor for the second.
Okay.
Mr. President, just one question, Director. Historically, what is the trail of delinquencies? Do you have a rough idea of, are there a lot of late fees assessed historically? Have there been, or?
Yes, we average probably approximately $1 million a year in late fees. And that's been pretty consistent over the last 4 or 5 years. $950 to $1,050,000 or something.
So that million in late fees, but the late fees, but the base tax was still paid as well.
Yes.
So they were paid up plus the late fee. So that was an excess to the budget of $1 million or so.
Yes, that is
Roughly.
also factored in the budget. That's one of the numbers.
Thank you.
Would also, to that point, I would assume there would be some that were delinquent, right?
Yes.
Delinquent taxes, right? So
Yes.
it's probably something of a wash.
Yeah, without actually looking at it, I'm sure there's probably, say, 10 million, and so you pay 10% on that. But so when you pay the late, if you're late in paying your quarterly tax, when it shows up, it just says you've paid it, and over here it says how much the total penalty is. So it doesn't break down how many parcels there were. I guess I could find that if it need be, but it's about $1 million a year.
Does any council member have any further questions at this time?
I have one more, please, Mr. Perdue, if I may. And Malcolm, on the next and the second passage, I'm happy to sponsor the resolution.
Thanks.
For a second. The late fees that are collected per this ordinance, if we were to collect the total of 104,129,075, and there were late fees assessed on some of those collections, what would then happen with the late fees? Could we, by ordinance, still collect those, or do those have to be returned? Or
No. I think if you look at, let me go back to the first page. The assessment. So when it's assessed at 104.
Yep.
Because if you go down to paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, it says if any succeeding installment of taxes is not paid by the last date of the respective unpaid balance, and it goes on, we'll collect a rate of 12%.
But I guess I'm asking what happens to the revenues that are collected by way of penalties if that amount exceeds the total assessment, right? If the amount collected plus penalties exceeds the total assessment, what then happens with?
I believe when they talk about the 104, that's just what is assessed. So we
Okay.
can't. The council says we're going to assess a levy of X, and so each year we have to figure out exactly how much increase that will be in May or June. And so we always talk about how much the levy is going to be, and the maximum and minimum levy. And then the penalty and interest is completely separate from that.
Councilman, if I can just, I haven't researched that particular question, but having worked with different areas of the tax code, and especially from a municipal perspective, the system is set up so that the municipalities have a very high leverage and are very advantaged in regards to collecting taxes. It's very hard for a municipality to sort of lose tax revenue. So it would be my assumption, although I haven't read this exact question, that the director's response is on point, that penalties are considered distinct from the assessment, so there wouldn't be any requirement to return any funds.
Nor to change an ordinance or anything like that.
Yes, that would be my assumption at this point in time. I can look into it more detail for that specific question, but in general, that's how the entire tax code is set up in terms of collections on behalf of municipalities.
May I simply ask that before we get to second passage, if you wouldn't mind researching that one question with regard to what is required to change the total assessment number, if it can even be done. Just want to make sure we know that before it goes final.
No problem.
Thank you.
Okay, this is again for first passage. Anyone have any other further questions at this time? If not, would anyone like to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve by Councilwoman Souza.
I'll second.
We have a second by Councilman Cahoon. Roll call vote, Madam Clerk.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morado.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moore. While you're up there,
The next is an ordinance authorizing the Director of Finance to borrow funds in anticipation of taxes.
And again, this is identical to the one that's been on the books for years and years. The only change in here would be the date. So we just change it. So every year I've got to come before you and say, get your approval to go out for tax anticipation notes every year, which we've done every year since I know.
at the pleasure of the council, anyone have any questions?
I do, Mr. President, but it's going to take me a second to find
Okay.
it.
In the meantime, does anyone else have any questions they'd like to address at this time to the Finance Director?
I think you're looking at page 41, Nate.
Thank you, Mr. Morado. Exactly, thanks. So, Malcolm, if I may, we have budgeted for TAN interest under our debt service line in the proposed budget, $200,000.
Yes.
Previous expenditures have been $91,000, $145,000, with a year-end estimate of FY19 of $48,100. Can you tell us why the anticipated change?
The last year we borrowed $17,017,500. I believe that this year it's probably going to be closer to 30. There's 2 or 3 reasons why, but some of that moved to capital. We'll be spending it. We've also had to pay some of the school bonding that comes in on a monthly basis, and so that'll increase that amount.
So then we are borrowing via the TAN channel in some way to offset the expenses of the school construction?
Yes.
And why?
But that will be, well, right now the way it's working is each month, as you know, we get a bill from the school department, and we have to pay it in full. We get reimbursed 50%. And so we can either borrow it, and further on, we'll also have bond anticipation notes. So either the TANs are going to go up. We're talking about borrowing $70 million for bands, which is the expenditures for the next 12 months. Now, we could make that 75 or 80 million to recoup that other, or we could do it in TANs. It depends on either way you're borrowing it.
Is there a difference in rate for TAN versus bands?
Not that I'm aware of.
So may I ask a question, Mr. President?
please.
So when we had the ballot item last year, and the amount was 189.5 for authorizing the city by way of vote, and then we, as a council, approved the ordinance for allowing the city to borrow up to 189.5. I suppose that we didn't specify the borrowing mechanism, right? And that's why we can borrow by way of TANs or bands or any other thing that's most advantageous to the city?
You're splitting hairs on bands and TANs on that one. I'd have to get back to you on that one. But we're going to, one way or another, we're going to have to borrow it's probably going to be close to $100 million come May or come January, December, January, February.
That makes sense. I just wonder why we would choose to do that by way of TANs when we've got the authority to take out a bond wholly and completely for the high school. I also wonder if, the total amount the amount that you reference, again, makes sense. That's kind of what's in my head, too. But one thing that we have to remember is that we have received from the state the upfront money of the $16 million or so to kind of kick that project off. So that will presumably come off of what we ultimately borrow, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it won't be 189.5, it'll be 173.5.
Yes. And that upfront money it's not really upfront money, it's reimbursing what we've spent. So originally I thought I was going to get a check for, say, $16 million. Well, if we spend $2 million, they'll give us 54% of that back the following, let's say, within 30 days or something.
True, but everything that we've spent is within the project costs of, but that's within the cost scope of that project, unless
Correct.
I'm mistaken. I'm not aware of any costs that are outside of that.
Yeah, as far as I know, nothing's over the 189.5. But so, to answer you, we're a little off topic on this one, but it doesn't make sense to borrow the $189 million right now in full because you'll be paying interest on it. And so normally you'll do bands, short-term borrowing for a year, year and a half. And talking with financial advisors, we're looking at borrowing, say, December, January, and then we'll have to do it again next December and January. And then we're hoping to go to bond probably in June, in about a year and a half.
So this TAN strategy, whereby we're using some money borrowed by way of TANs to fund the expenditures related to the school, that is blessed by our bond advisor and bond counsel.
I can get that clarified.
I would appreciate that.
Question, either bands or TANs, the interest, is this all figured into the bond? Was that, is this an extra cost? I assume this would have been anticipated, or?
The interest on the bands, it was not part of the bond cost. That would be outside. And that would come due in, say, a year from December.
So you won't know the amount until?
Well, when we borrow, let's say we borrow January 1st, at that time, you'll know exactly what the interest rate is and how much your interest you'll have to pay at the end of that period. But you won't know till then.
Yep.
Any other further questions from the council? Okay. That being said, would anyone like to make a motion?
Mr. President, I'll move approval for first passage.
Okay.
There are a couple of questions that Councilman Cahoon had asked, so with the proviso that we have those by second passage time. Okay.
Very good. So we have a motion on the floor for approval at this time by Councilman Rodriguez. Would anyone like to second that motion?
I would like to add that before I vote, and I'm only one person, before I vote yes on second passage, I'd like to see the overall strategy for borrowing for not just the city, but all the school construction costs. We talked about a number of different possibilities, and I understand that we're trying to get the best deal for the city, and that makes sense. I just want to know what we're kind of signing up to in terms of whether they're TANs, bands, straight school construction bond, whatever it might be. I want to kind of understand that.
All right. We've had preliminary discussions. I can give you kind of an outline of what we're looking at.
But we've had a bond counsel or a bond advisor on
Correct.
staff, I think since February or March. And I mean, this is October. I think it's reasonable to say, what's the strategy 7 months later?
Well, we've got a strategy. The question you get into on part of this is that we're obviously trying to save the city the most amount of money. And one of the questions is, of that 50-some million that's not reimbursable, it's not all, they reimbursed to 135.
Yep.
Of that, we've been working with the infrastructure bank, and it looks like a chunk of that could go to the infrastructure bank, which would be at a different interest rate. But we have to get the blessing of RIDE first, and then go to talk to the infrastructure bank exactly how much we can. And then that technically could be 2 bonds, but then you have to have a third one for that additional $10 million that's not covered by anything. So until we get an answer from RIDE and then from the infrastructure bank, we're not sure whether it'd be 1, 2, or 3 bonds. But I can kind of lay it out. We're looking to borrow about X in December, and then again a revised amount the following December, and then go to bond for the 189 in June.
So I think my discomfort comes from increasing the borrowing of TANs from year on year by about 13 million, with the explanation that some of that is for school construction, without knowing specifically how much of that is for school construction. And we don't know specifically how much of it is for school construction because we haven't yet seen the plan of what we're going to borrow from where and when. And I think that's a reasonable question for people that are on contract to provide that advice back to the council, especially after 7 months of them being on contract or whatever it is. So I will, I'm happy to support first passage tonight, and I will second the motion that was made.
So we have a motion, Councilman Roderick, seconded by Councilman Cahoon. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Please.
So with Councilman Cahoon's questions, so we don't have any answers really on this ordinance. Wouldn't it be best to table it until we do get that instead of advertising it and putting it on for a second passage?
Through the chair, please.
Please.
We will be borrowing TANs. So this just gives me the authority. What we're discussing here is the amount. But whether it's 15 million or 30 million, we're still borrowing TANs. So that's all this is doing, is saying I have the authority to do that. I still have to come back for an amount. So when that's finally done, we have to go through the process of that. And I think the council president has to sign that.
I do.
Then we have to do a cash flow and send it over.
So with the council president having to sign the amount, there isn't another vote required by the council to approve the amount?
I believe that would come with the second passage. It gives me the authority to do TANs.
So you'll have that amount then?
Would this
I will
language
try.
change at all from first passage to second passage? Any of those questions?
Mr. President, so I think what would happen, Councilman Morato, is rather than not delay the process, those questions need to be answered before second passage. But at least this first passage is an authoritative thing for the director. But Councilman Cahoon raised some good questions, and I think you intended them to be reflective of what happens before second passage and shouldn't affect
I'm not going to sign up to
first
to borrow unless I know how much we're borrowing and what it's.
Correct.
And that can always be amended as well, the second passage. So I would expect, anticipate that we'll have that answer by the next meeting.
But you don't see first passage as being blocked.
First passage is fine.
Right.
You get that through.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I second it.
Any other further questions, Councilman?
Well said, thank you.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
So Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council Vice President Roderick.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye, thank you. Stay right there. You got 2 more to go.
The next is an ordinance authorizing the Director of Finance to borrow funds in anticipation of bonds.
And this obviously is a new one because we haven't had to borrow against bonds in quite some time. But this is a bond anticipation note, borrowing against the. So what you do is you borrow, as I said, $70 million, and let's just say then it's 140 the next December, and then you'd go to bond for 189 million, or whatever that final number would be, 173, and we're thinking June at this moment. But we need some answers from RIDE on that first.
So are we putting the cart in front of the horse at this point in time then, or should we wait for these answers, or for these questions to be answered?
We're going to have to borrow short term. And we've been talking about borrowing, and again, it's sort of a guesstimate because we have, every month we meet and he says, this is what we think we're going to spend for the next 12 months. And so what we may do is say, okay, we'll borrow for that 12 months, but then go back and what Councilman Cahoon had said is we'll go back and see what we spent for the last 6 months and then borrow against that. So we may have a band for 75 to 80 million, and which would reduce the TANs. But I should be able to get an answer by the next meeting.
Okay. right, so, yeah.
Question, forgive my naivete, but a question on steps here. The public has voted for a bond issue, $189 million. We know there's 54% reimbursed. We know there's a possibility of close to 74.
Correct.
What monies has the city received, if any, at this point? I mean, there was an approved bond, it's been approved by RIDE, it's been approved by bonding attorneys, and
so what
do we have in the bank now?
For the bond, very little. From the bond, actually, we have nothing because we have not gone out to bond. We have the authority to go to public to borrow the 189.5, which will be reduced by the 15 or 16 million we got up front. The only thing we've received is, I don't know, $1 or $2 million, which is the upfront money. And so instead of what normally happens is we borrow $190 million, and then let's just say each year we spend $12 million. Then RIDE will reimburse us 54%, but for easy math, they'll reimburse us $6 million. And that's the way it normally works. But you've got to go to bond first. With this upfront money, whatever we pay on a monthly basis, they'll reimburse us 54%. And so whatever that amount is, so we'll be paying that out. And then we will have to go to borrow against the note, which is short term, which will be, say, $70 million, then $140, and then we'll go out to bond for the whole, for the balance, $173 million.
So if I were to summarize that, I think it's fair to say the only funds that we've received, the only revenue we've received thus far is the state monies, the 16 million or so that was provided up front, and we've been spending that down with the invoices that we've been paying. Plus, as Malcolm mentioned, a lot of that, not a lot, but a piece of that was used to pay for expenses that were incurred prior to, the hiring of the contract manager, et cetera, right? School construction-related expenditures. I think, and this is just a wag, I want to say there's about half of it left. That's just a guess off the top of my head. I can get the council that based on, we have an invoice meeting coming up next week.
But I don't think that the state only, it's not like they gave us a $60 million that sits out there.
Right.
And I think now we may have billed them for half of that, but I think we've only received 1 or 2 months worth so far. I'd have to check on that. I don't remember, unless Mike would know right off the top of his head, but I can get that number. But so we have to spend, say, $32 million. And then once we spend the 32, we'll spend it on a monthly basis, and we'll end up getting, say, half of that back. So then we will go to bond for that other half eventually. And that's why we go from the 189 minus the 16 to 173.
Is there anybody else who would like to see that in like a picture form? Because certainly that would help me.
Yeah.
Right?
I can put a
cash flow, something, some simple
definitely.
cash flow.
Yeah. Schedule.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so as it stands right now, any other further questions at this point in time from the council
On this.
before we proceed with a vote?
Mr. President, I move to approve first passage.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Roddick, were you about to say?
No, I was going to second.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor by Councilman Cahoon to move for first passage, seconded by Councilman Rodriguez. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morado.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye, thank you. Last ordinance for this first passage.
The next is an ordinance authorizing the Director of Finance to borrow funds in anticipation of revenue.
And this is very similar to the TANs. It only applies to water and sewer. Since they are enterprise funds, you borrow in anticipation of revenue instead of anticipation of taxes.
Any questions from the council?
Yes, can you explain that? That doesn't increase the sewer
No, it
or
doesn't.
water rates, right?
No, and this just gives me the authority. We have not had to do that in a couple of years, but we had to do that for a number of years. So it's just been on there just in case. So we have not had to use that in the last two years,
Yeah, 2015 was the last.
something like that, yes.
pleasure of the council.
Mr. President, move approval, first passage.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Councilman Rodriguez for approval, seconded by Councilman Morato. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Moore. Moving right on.
Next is public hearing, second passage for vote. An ordinance and amendment of Chapter 3 of the revised ordinances of the City of East Providence, Rhode Island, 1998, as amended, entitled Animals, sponsored by Council President Brito.
All right, so the last time we had this discussion, there was a concern that Councilwoman had addressed, Section 2. You have those sections in front of you at this point in time?
I didn't realize.
There's 2 sections there that she was asking to have removed, and I would like to make an amendment on the ordinance to have those 2 sections removed.
So forgive me, Council President, I didn't realize that when they posted, when the solicitor put this, that it did not have the amendments on it, so I did not bring my previous notes to the meeting. I was under the assumption that when I had sent that information over to the solicitor that it was amended, but...
If I'm not mistaken, I think the first section is Section 3-7, impounding, reclaiming, destroying of animals.
There is 3-6. Oh, no, that's... Hold on. I did jot some notes. 3-7.
3-6 is the one without a license.
Oh, sorry, there was other notes there, too. So 3-6, I'll come back to that one. 3-7.
Impounding, reclaiming, destroying of animals. We'll eliminate that and
that section.
take that out. And then you had one other section in there.
There was a section that spoke to 3-24, minimum care of animals, not to have an animal tied for a prolonged period to any stationary objects such as a tree, fence, pole, or other device for longer than the time it took for the animal to relieve itself.
3-24, minimum care of animals.
Correct.
Okay. So 3-7, I don't have any issues with the removal of those 2 sections, 3-7 and 3-24. Does anyone have any questions regarding those 2 sections in the ordinance?
No, there was more. So 3-21, that also kind of correlates with 2-7, euthanization.
Okay. Okay, so that's 3-7, 3-21, 3-24.
And then, Council President, if you could just, one more, is Section 3-6, kennels, licensures, inspections, and fees. I would like if we could add maybe subsection C under B, that would require any facility that operates, that boards any animals for 24 hours, but does not have staff at the facility for 24 hours, that there would be a sprinkler system in place in the event that there was a fire at the facility. The animals would have a chance, or at least time, to be rescued.
And what section is that again? 3-6 what?
To be put under
B,
Section 3-6, kennels, licenses, and inspection fees. So as part of Section B, animal control is hereby authorized to direct and directed to make kennel inspections to protect the health, safety, and welfare of pets and the general public. We have a section A, and there's a section B, so I would suggest maybe putting a C, or put a 4 under.
And include sprinkler system?
Mm-hmm.
Do these commercial buildings require a sprinkler system to begin with?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure, but I know, for an example, so the Rockford Aquarium had a fire quite some time ago, and there was no sprinkler systems in that building, and all those animals unfortunately burned because they couldn't get to them in time, and they were locked in their cage. So I just don't want a situation where if there's a fire in any facility that has animals that aren't able to get out or not manned by a person for 24 hours, that at least sprinklers go off to give a fighting chance before somebody gets there. I think that was it.
Okay. Anyone have any questions at this point in time?
Nothing.
Okay.
Did we do section, we said section 326, right? 3-26, okay.
3-7, 3-24, 3-26, and 36C, or 4. 721, 7-6, 3-6, 3-7, 20, 21, and 24.
In 26A, just to, number 2, in paragraph A, just strike the line that says animal to be euthanized for humane reasons.
That entire paragraph?
Just strike the line.
Oh, 3-26?
Yep, under section A, Roman numeral 2.
Under 2, yeah. About halfway through the paragraph.
Oh, okay. Hold on.
That's all, Council President. Thank you.
Okay.
So then we won't be making second passage tonight.
Public hearing.
Yeah, this is a public hearing.
That's right.
So, all right.
If I may, Mr. President, public hearing would entitle members of the public wanting to address this, but it will be my recommendation that we don't complete second passage because this is relatively extensive amendments. I'm not personally familiar with the travel of this, so I want to make sure that the language matches exactly what the proposed amendments are this evening. So any motion this evening, I would request a motion to amend as stated.
And defer until the next meeting for second passage?
Yes,
Okay.
and there would be a public hearing at that meeting as well, but that wouldn't preclude from having a public hearing today.
So as it stands right now, we would just like to eliminate these sections and also not only add but delete as well. With that being said, that would include sections 3-6, 3-7, 3-21, 24, and 26, 2 in Roman numerals.
Yes.
So would anyone like to make a motion to defer this ordinance to the next council meeting for second passage being amended?
I make a motion to amend and as written and defer to next council meeting.
Okay, would anyone like to second that motion?
May I ask one question?
Sure.
We would need to, if then we're doing second passage, we would then need to advertise the amended ordinance, correct? Okay, I will second.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Just who has all amendments? The city clerk, do you have all the changes? Is sufficient?
I have all the changes in the
And you have
the
them,
report.
President has them. Okay.
And I will meet with Dylan just to go over.
No problem.
I'll meet with
Okay.
the solicitor.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye, thank you. Next item, please.
Mr. President,
Yes.
it still was listed as a public hearing, so we do need to ask the public if anyone wishes to address
Okay.
this item.
So with that being said, anyone from the public would like to address the ordinance that was just brought before us? Anyone from the ordinance would like to come up and speak on for or against the ordinance? Again, this ordinance will be deferred to the next council meeting, which will also be a public hearing as well. Thank you. With that being said, public hearing is closed.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Next item, please. Thank you.
The next item is an ordinance and amendment of Chapter 18 of the revised ordinances of the City of East Providence, Rhode Island, 1998, as amended, entitled Vehicles and Traffic, sponsored by Councilman Cahoon.
So this was simply an ordinance to install stop signs at an intersection in Kent Heights. I don't know if there are any questions, but I think this is public comment as well about, okay.
Stop sign located at what intersection?
Stop sign is located, the ordinance makes a four-way stop sign at the intersection of Allerton and, bear with me for 1 second, please. I'm sorry, what did you say, Madam? Yes, Bradford. And the idea is that Bradford is often used as a cut-through in that neighborhood. So.
Mr. President,
Would like to make a motion?
I know it's a public hearing, so before I make a motion,
Okay.
did you?
This is a public hearing. Anyone like to speak for or against this ordinance, please step up to the podium. Again, this is a public hearing. Anyone like to speak for or against this ordinance, please speak up. Please step up to the podium. If not, public hearing is closed at the pleasure of the council.
I move for passage.
We have a motion for approval. Second. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council Vice President Brito. Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye. Thank you. Next item, please.
The next is a public hearing, budget fiscal year 2019-2020, ordinance of the Council of the City of East Providence appropriating $190,658,524 for the support of the city government for the fiscal year ending October 31st, 2020.
Again, this is a public hearing. Anyone from the public have any comments they would like to share at this point in time? Please step up to the podium. Again, anyone from the audience would like to speak either for or against this? It says a public hearing. Okay. Public hearing is now closed at the pleasure of the council.
We'll continue to defer this as this is part of the workshops we still have.
We could do that. Yeah.
Right, 'cause
Okay.
We have a budget workshop tomorrow.
So you want to form that into a motion that we just defer this to the...
Mr. President, my recommendation would be to continue this to a date certain because it is a public hearing. So if any motion to continue could include the date and time that the hearing will take place.
So the date will be tomorrow, which is October 2nd. If I'm not mistaken, it does not need to be posted because we already have a hearing at this.
No, so I think with the, so I'm going to make a motion to continue this public hearing, and I think we set a date of
hold it.
the 10th of October.
That's what I'm showing.
October 10th.
Oh.
And in between that, we will continue to hold workshops for the budget, and we recommend and welcome the public to come in and speak for or against anything on the budget, or reach out to your council members if you have any concerns on the budget.
Mr. Council President, since we're on that topic,
I'm sorry.
it's my recommendation that we really don't have a lot of time to go through the remaining budget. We've only gone through 5 departments. I would recommend that we add some more workshop dates to the dates that we already discussed at the last workshop.
So, Madam Clerk, would you like to, do you have those dates in front of you that you can read out to the public, please?
Yes, absolutely. We have a workshop scheduled for tomorrow that starts at 7 o'clock. That has been posted to the Secretary of State website, also on Clerkbase. We have another one that is showing public hearing date for October 10th. That's a workshop. And then I believe we also agreed to Friday, October 11th. And all the budget workshops will start at 7 p.m. We have another one, if needed, for October 16th, again at 7 p.m. And should it be needed, I think we left it open-ended for maybe the 24th or 25th, if that's
But we
needed.
did away with that. Because we could,
Yeah, well,
yeah.
We have to,
that one wasn't solidified. That was
Yeah.
just kind of open.
so per schedule, if we have to pass this budget, it would have to be October 10th, correct? Dylan? If we have to pass this budget, it would have to be October 10th, correct?
I don't know the date calculation off the top of my head, but
So-
there's a 7 days before the end of the year is required final action of this council.
Then that
of
would
the
take,
fiscal year.
yeah, the 7 days would take it to October 25th. However, I'm looking at the possible veto of this budget. We would need 10 business days. Is it business days, or does weekends include in those 10 days? And a
I'm sorry,
holiday.
the clerk is trying to tell me how many days there are.
There's a holiday on the 14th also, so we're wondering with the veto, does that include the weekends and a holiday, or does that include actual working days in City Hall?
I'd have to refer to the section of the charter to know specifically, but I will say that there is some ambiguity because any vote of passage by this council will be a final action by the council, and that may actually comply with the requirement that you do it 7 days beforehand. If it were to be vetoed subsequently, it's a question as to whether or not the previous year's budget would move forward or whether it would just return for this council's response, whether or not to override the veto. But if I can... Is it no, it's 511 maybe?
511. 11, 512, 513.
Malcolm, our year ends the 31st,
That is correct.
Okay.
And it has to be passed
7 days prior to the 31st.
at least 7 days prior to the end of the fiscal year. And now, I think we said two things for the 10th. Originally, we talked, when we extended the meeting, that was the 10th, but that was a public hearing, and then the clerk had also said workshop on the 10th. You can't have both. But if any line item is increased, then you have to publish again, and it's got to be published 5 days before the next public hearing.
But if that meeting's back-to-back, do you still have to publish that meeting? So if we have one today and another one tomorrow, does that meeting still have to be
Tomorrow's the
published? Or is it?
workshop.
No, I understand, but I'm just saying in general.
A workshop is what you're contemplating, so there are actually no votes taken. So if you can have a public hearing and it can be final, and you're allowed to decrease line items, but as the charter says, if you increase any line item, then you have to publish that again in the paper, and it has to be there for 5 days before your next meeting.
Okay.
If I can address the clerk's earlier questions, 10 consecutive days, not business days. So regardless of holiday or weekend, it's just 10 days.
Thank you.
So not to belabor this point, but let's back this out, because this is important, right? So the final action must be taken no later than 7 days before the end of the current fiscal year.
Correct.
Per the charter, right?
Correct.
So by 7 days before the end of the fiscal year, I back that out to the 24th, not the 25th, right?
I think it
So
says
our-
at least 7 days, so I think the seventh day would count. And again, I defer to the solicitor, but
Okay, so
with
let's-
1 day, but
Let's go backwards. Let's assume that the 24th is the hearing on which we issue the final action, right? Now, I would submit that, per Malcolm's point, should we find ourselves in a position where we are increasing a budgetary line item, and I'm introducing a resolution to do just that, we then need to publish, if we decide that that's what we want to do, we then need to publish, advertise the budget for 5 days before a public hearing to discuss that very matter. So we'll need to work that in if that's what the council determines is the right thing to do.
So 5 days prior to the 24th.
5 days prior to the 24th. Well,
19th.
yes, 5 days prior to the 24th. Yes?
19th.
Dylan?
Yes.
All right. I know you were concentrating on two things, so, okay.
Which is a bit of an oxymoron.
So then we would have to really decide what our budget is, no kidding, no later than 19 October.
But my question is, for a charter, seeing that this budget gets adopted through ordinance, can this budget be vetoed?
Yes.
Okay, so we have to give ourselves 10 days from that veto date, and assuming that it would be vetoed at midnight on the 10th date, we need to have time to vote on that budget, to override that veto, if that's the case, 7 days prior to the end of the fiscal year.
That takes you back down into around the 16th, right?
So there are two possible alternatives for how you would interpret a veto. A veto would be subsequent to a motion by this council to approve a budget ordinance. That would be a final action. However, does the veto effectively undo a final action? Or do you just come back before the council later on and you're not in violation of the charter because you had correctly performed a final action? This is a question of first impression for the city of East Providence because this is the first time that there's been the authority for a mayoral veto. Now, this may have occurred in similar circumstances in other municipalities, but the charter won't be exactly the same. So the court's answer wouldn't be exactly the same. It would be informative but not controlling. It would be my suggestion that a vote of this council is a final action, which would mean that you have until 7 days before the end of the fiscal year, regardless of the veto. However, I can't guarantee you that that would be upheld. I could do further research on that front, but for the sake of picking dates today, that won't be helpful.
So why don't we schedule today to be as conservative as possible? But just that point you made, that's interesting, right? So if the council were to assert that the budget is final, right?
Yes.
Done. Veto doesn't matter. We've taken our final action, right?
You would have complied with the charter requirement that you take a final action 7 days prior to the end of the fiscal year.
But if the mayor were to veto it, which is his right by ordinance, if that's what he chooses
Correct.
to do, right? That would be a scenario where the council and the mayor had a very different sides on an issue that very much impacted the city of East Providence.
Correct.
Yes. Okay.
So with that said, if we go by that schedule, then it gives us October 11th, right, as a final passage.
21st.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So with that said, we would need to schedule, somehow fit some more workshops between tomorrow and
Next Friday.
October 10th.
Why would the final passage have to be on the 11th?
Because per charter, if this, he has 10 days to veto after the final passage.
But I thought,
Because it's in an ordinance, the budget gets passed in ordinance per charter provision, the mayor can veto that ordinance.
So it wouldn't have to be the final hearing. Let's run it through, right? The 11th would have to be the date that we really made up our mind, and we decided to go advertise. Add 5 days, right? Right? Assuming that we're going to advertise the next day, so let's add 6 days, right? Take us to the 17th. Right? So the 17th would be the hearing at which we took our final action, right?
Correct.
And then the mayor would have 10 days to review and veto if he so chose to.
Correct.
And that would take us to potentially the 27th of October.
Correct.
And that would, and then should we then need to convene to override a veto on, say, the 28th or the 29th, that would then not be a problem per charter?
So that is a question of first impression, but I believe a vote by this council would be a final action, and so that final action would be 7 days prior to the end of the fiscal year. So long as this council passes something 7 days prior to the end of the fiscal year, I believe that would be a final action. But I really do want to underscore, and very much to Councilman Morato's point, that is an ambiguity. There is no certainty on that front. This is a question of first impression for the city of East Providence. It's specific to our charter language, so we can't look to other municipalities to say this is exactly how it will work, or other case law to see how it will exactly work. It will be informative but not controlling. So anytime there's a question of first impression, that's lawyer speak for saying there's no guarantee.
So with that said, I err on the side of caution and
Back out 3 more days.
So the 24th would be the final.
So we would need to then make our final decision, advertise for 5 days, take
The
the
11th.
final action. The final action would have to be taken on the 14th.
The 14th is a holiday.
Of course it is.
Not for the council. I mean, it's a holiday for public sector, the city. It's municipality workers, but certainly the council members, I know for myself, I don't take holidays, so, and I'm actually working that holiday to be more specific, but we certainly could, if we needed to, take action on the 14th, but the 11th probably would be better.
To the chair. But working backwards from that, if you're saying you have to have a decision on the 14th, you haven't voted on anything, so at the 10th, if you are going to vote on the 10th to say this is what it's going to be, then you still have to advertise.
No, I would say we would come to a general consensus on the 14th and advertise, and then take the final vote after the advertise. The hearing would be after 5 days, which the public had a chance to review it. Then we take our vote at the hearing, at which there will also be public.
But the date of that would be
5 days from whatever. So let's just use the 14th. Forget that it's a holiday for a second. Take 5 days from the 14th, right? Assuming that you can get the advertisement in immediately, that takes us to the 19th.
19th, Saturday.
Yeah, this is insanity.
So the way I think about it, final action is 7 days beforehand, plus the veto is 10 days before that, plus 5 days for advertising is 22 days back from the end of the fiscal year. So 22 days back from October 31st brings us to the 9th. Is that the 9th as the last date where the council can choose to increase an item in the budget?
And that would have to be done by way of vote?
Yes. Now, that is the most conservative route to go because there is no definitive answer about whether or not a vote of the council is a final action sufficient to comply with that specific section of the charter.
if you count the 10th, that's actually, if you count the 10th, the day of, that takes us to the 10th then, not the 9th. 22 days.
Would be the 10th. Okay. Understood.
So the 10th would be the date to vote on.
To do any increase so that you could do the advertisement the following day.
And then we could have a workshop on the 11th or no?
You could have a workshop, but if you wanted to change the increase, you wouldn't be able to do it.
So why not have a workshop on the 10th and have a public hearing on the 11th?
We have to.
You could certainly do that.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking of.
but you can't increase a line item.
No, that would comply. That would comply with the timeline to advertise.
Before inserting any additional item or increasing any item of appropriation, it must be caused to be published with notice setting forth the nature of the proposal increase with a fixed place and time, not less than 5 days after the publication, at which time the council would hold a public hearing.
Yep.
So, Councilman Cahoon had said that, I think one of the suggestions was to move money under the council from another department. And if you do that, that's an increase, so we would have to advertise that at some point in time.
Correct.
Right.
So when we add that to next
Advertise everything tomorrow. Set up a schedule tonight.
Can't advertise it tomorrow. We haven't come to any kind of, we still got more work.
When would be the advertising date for that?
We have to have the line items. We might have hit another line item that we want to increase.
Can I suggest something for the schedule?
I think I can speak for all of us when I say 45 days with this budget is not going to work in the future, so we're going to be coming up with something different. But in the meantime, what we've got to work with is, as I'm hearing, we want to shoot for a goal of approving our budget, and I mean approving our budget, on the 10th of October.
Yes.
Submitting all
Yep.
changes.
So that can be advertised and voted on 5 days thereafter.
Yep.
So that will be the hearing. Then we'll have a hearing on the 15th to take the vote. And that's our final action, to use
Let's do it.
solicitor's words. And then wherever that goes, it goes. Now, 10 days plus the 15th is the 25th. And I would submit that we cannot advertise immediately. You're not going to walk out of here in a meeting at 10 o'clock and go put it in the paper.
I have the space reserved already. It's just the
So
content they're
it's
waiting
at
on.
least the next day. It's at least one
But-
more day.
Yeah.
Through the chair,
Yes.
but we've got that through the Times, and that only runs on Thursday. So would they hold the space, so after the Tuesday meeting, we can send it over Tuesday night, and it'll be in the paper on Thursday? If you're talking about a meeting on Wednesday or Thursday, then you'd have to look at the Journal to put that in.
That's right.
And I don't know what
You're
the
right.
Which is fine.
timeline is
He's right.
with the Journal.
We have it in the budget to do it.
I just
for
recommend that
advertising.
we have a
Fine.
hearing every night, a workshop every night until we get this done.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, seriously,
Yeah.
I'm not joking around.
Me either.
You know, and let's get it done as quickly as we can
Just check.
and not mess around with any of this nonsense.
So just to make sure, we want to do public hearing for the 11th? Is that what the council desires? Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
So can we schedule one for Friday? This Friday?
A workshop?
A workshop. And it would be a continuation of, actually, we have a workshop tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
And we should do another
The
one.
3rd and the 4th, that would be a continuation of the workshop on the 2nd.
You can certainly schedule that. There's no issue with scheduling workshops like that.
So why don't we schedule, I know it's going to be hard, and, but we need to get this
Roll up the
done.
sleeves, man.
Thursday and Friday, the 3rd and the 4th?
I suggest going tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
Me
Let's
too.
do it.
Now, the only thing I'll say to that is Thursday, it's, the time's 8:09 right now, so we would have to meet at like 8:30 in order to be compliant with the Secretary of State. Is that right, Dylan? Or no, can we just roll that?
Be a continuation.
It'd be a
You wouldn't be
continuation?
able to post it just now. I mean, you could continue the meeting. I'll have to touch base with the Secretary of State's office to make sure that they're agreeable to us proceeding in that format. But no votes are going to be held.
Right.
So that's really, they're generally comfortable with the scenario that's a workshop. It's publicly advertised. No votes are going to be held. So if we just get that out as soon as humanly possible, it would probably also fall underneath the emergency exemption, given the deadlines involved under the charter.
Right. Okay.
7 o'clock, still, same time?
Anybody have the chambers reserved?
I could definitely check.
Is there a reason that we have to advertise in one paper versus another? I mean, I know we want to
No.
use the local paper, but if it only publishes every 7 days and we need something daily, can't we go to the Journal?
We sure can.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the only reason was through the years, the cost factor. The Journal got so expensive, but at this point, it's an expense that we need to incur because we can do it quickly.
And your budget can support it. The
It's in the
advertising
budget.
through the clerk's
Okay.
office.
Yeah, I think just typically for just regular resolutions and regular council work, the local works best because we don't need quick, but for situations like
Right.
this or emergency meetings, that's why there's daily publication.
And let's just see where we are on a night-by-night basis and, schedule rolling meetings thereafter as we need
That
them.
makes it easy.
I just want to make one more suggestion. If we could put off those departments that are under budget for now till the end and take care of the ones that are the more important ones with the large increases. My suggestion would be then if we run out of time, but if we at the end have time, we can visit those departments also. That would be my suggestion.
Well, at our last workshop, we had pretty much set our schedule, and I think those department heads have probably been informed of that. We were going to continue right in the budget book in order. Now, if we change that, we need to have time to get word to those departments.
Yeah, I don't think that'll be an issue. Just looking at the budget book, just foregoing those that are on the budget. For example,
I think with the times that we're
scheduling,
we probably will get to everything, Councilman.
Yeah.
I understand the concern, but I think with all the dates that we're putting in, we're going to get through them all, and there shouldn't be an issue.
So you would skip, for example, tax collection until the end. We'll go in that order, except for those, just hold those off until the end. So that's just my suggestion.
It's going to be fairly difficult to give a schedule for when we're going to talk about what, especially once we get into capital stuff, which is going to require a lot of discussion and impacts multiple departments.
We only do this once a year, right?
So as it stands right now, we have workshops for tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, 7 to 9, and the clerk will check to see whether or not the council chambers is available, just to make sure.
The only thing that would be an interference is municipal court on Thursday, but they're usually done no later than 6:30.
Okay, fine.
Council President, can we go over the following week? What does that agenda look like in terms of workshop and budget hearing? So are we having a workshop on the 9th?
16th, looks like.
So that's going to take us the week of the 7th. And
7th.
Are we doing the 10th?
9th
what we
was the
have
workshop.
scheduled right now is the 10th. It's a hearing,
A hearing.
a budget hearing on the 10th.
I would submit we want our final approval no later than the 9th. If we then want 5 days to advertise, right? The 9th is what day?
Wednesday.
Perfect.
So would that mean Wednesday?
No, you can't get it in the paper by then. You got to get it in by Tuesday. Well, we could put it in the journal.
In the journal.
So we'll put it in
just
the journal.
advertise in the journal.
So then we complete on the 9th, right? We have our final vote. It goes in on the 10th, right? Goes into the paper on the 10th. Advertises for 5 days. That goes to the 15th. We have our final action on the 15th. Again, that takes us to the same problem of 10 days getting us to the 25th. But we've had our final action. So then if it comes back at that point and there's a veto after that point,
You're
we
still
can use
7
any time
days
between
behind.
the 25th and the beginning of the fiscal year.
So are you saying that public hearing is going to be scheduled for the 9th, not the 10th or the 11th?
Yes.
Yes, a public hearing on the 9th. With as many workshops as we need in between. So the 9th is a week from tomorrow. So basically we have 3, 4, 5 potential meetings to get that in.
All right, so that leaves us again.
And that's
this
7
week,
publication days.
of this week here gives us Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Through the chair,
Yes.
Councilman, you could also have a workshop on Wednesday beforehand if you wanted. If you wanted to start earlier, have the workshop or the...
Oh, I see. Have it before, separate the two. Even though it's on the same day, they're separate meetings.
Correct.
Yep.
All right. How about, do we have anything, or are we scheduling anything for Monday and Tuesday of next week, 7th and 8th? No,
Nothing.
just finalizing it on Wednesday. Okay.
We had a workshop on the Wednesday. We'd have to change that to a hearing. Right.
You can piggyback them as separate meetings.
Okay.
So we'd need to set times for those separate meetings.
And really, if we do all of our homework by way of the workshops that we're having leading up there, our hearing should be a fairly short meeting, barring whatever, public comments.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there's a possibility we can go through these the next 3 days, so.
There's that possibility as well. So, again, just for clarification, just for the public use, we will have workshops, tomorrow being the 2nd, Thursday being the 3rd, and Friday being the 4th, at 7 p.m. in the council chambers. And then we will come back the following week, the week of the 7th, on the 9th for a budget hearing, for a public hearing, that would be.
And then the 10th for a workshop? Is that what you wanted, or?
We still need a,
Nope, after the 9th.
that's it?
Then we're
That's it?
done.
We're done?
Yes.
Submitted.
Okay.
Until the announcement completes, the advertisement completes, and then we come back for a final action on the 15th, 1/5, Ides of October.
Yes.
And that would be,
The 15th.
That's a
That'll be-
Tuesday.
Oh, I'm sorry, what day? I'm sorry.
I don't know, is the school committee meeting then? We'd have to check.
Yeah.
Check.
Council meeting, the 15th.
Okay.
The 15th is the
Okay.
council meeting.
But the school committee will meet on the 8th,
okay,
so we'll have to find a different place to
all
meet.
right. Let me just put this.
What's the 8th?
A week from today.
A workshop?
Well, if we decide
If
we
we-
need one,
Right.
right.
Okay. All right, so as it stands right now, we have a motion on the floor by Councilwoman Souza to defer the public hearing till next week.
Continue.
Continued until next Tuesday, or with the 9th, that is? That'll be,
Next Wednesday.
and
9th.
next Wednesday, the 9th. Would anyone like to second that motion? We have a second by Councilman Cahoon. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye, thank you. Next item, please.
Next item is new business, reports of other city officials, and that would be Assistant City Solicitor Dylan Conley with the Claims Committee report.
There were 7 motions held in executive session. All were unanimous. The minutes were sealed, and there was a motion to return to public session immediately thereafter. That's the conclusion of my report.
Okay. Resolutions, moving right along to resolutions.
Next, the first
You know,
resolution.
Hold on a moment for that.
This is the first one. Oh, no, I lost my agenda over here.
I'll defer my resolution to the next.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
And this is for the solicitor, so I don't know if... just wait until he's done. Question, Dylan.
Yes.
Mr. President, Brito's resolution, which he's just said we're going to table until next time,
Okay.
is a resolution calling on the United States to lead a global effort to prevent nuclear war. I would submit that regardless of my feelings of that one way or another, as a federal employee, I probably should recuse myself of a vote that's telling the federal government
That makes perfect sense.
Okay.
I think much more from a personal employment standpoint than anything else.
So
Yes.
I'm not going to tell my employer how to do their business, regardless.
This was your chance to tell Washington what to do.
I've tried.
And in the meantime, I'll defer that to the next meeting. So,
Okay.
next item, please.
Next item is resolution in support of the school department's funding request for the 2020 fiscal year, sponsored by Councilman Cahoon.
So, and I would like to point out that this is co-sponsored by Ms. Brito and myself. I think it's probably it's short, so I think it's probably easiest to just read this. So this is a resolution in support of the school department's funding request for the 2020 fiscal year, whereas the East Providence School Department presented to the East Providence City Council a budget request including a year-on-year increase in the city's allocation of $2,391,033, and whereas the mayor's proposed budget of September 17th, 2019 recommends a reduction of that proposed increase in the amount of $950,000, and whereas the East Providence School Department's request accounts for a year-on-year increase of school department costs of $2,029,270, resulting from contractual salary and benefit increases. and whereas the East Providence School Department has assumed since June of 2019 an additional burden of approximately $600,000 resulting from out-of-district placements by the Rhode Island Department of Children, Youth, and Families, and whereas the East Providence City Council is committed to sound, responsible fiscal policy with regard to the schools of East Providence, now therefore be it resolved that the City Council of the City of East Providence hereby commits to funding the East Providence School Department's fiscal year 2020 request in the full requested amount of $87,937,696 to include state aid of $36,222,919 for a city allocation of $50,124,777. And that's the resolution.
At the pleasure of the council. Does anyone have any thoughts at this point in time?
Make a motion to approve the resolution as read.
I'll second that. I don't have anything really to add other than this is what the school had presented. The city council, this is what the city council affirmed that they were in line with and thought was appropriate for our students and our school department. So I'm more than happy to support this.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor by Councilman Morato, seconded by Councilwoman Souza. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye. Thank you.
I would also like to thank Mr. Solicitor Conley for helping me tweak some language in that initially imperfect draft. So thank you.
No problem.
With that being said,
Next resolution is resolution prescribing the duties of the Assistant Solicitor, sponsored by Council President Brito, Council Vice President Rodrick, Councilman Cahoon, Councilman Morato, and Councilwoman Souza.
I can address this through the chair if you deem that to be appropriate.
please.
So essentially a combination of my engagement with the city and my duties underneath the charter. I am the council's attorney, I am the mayor's attorney. I am obligated to perform such duties as may be prescribed to me. This resolution essentially makes me responsive to you individually or collectively, so that I will perform work on your behalf. And it would be my hope that this would sort of improve the rate of return on some of the work concerns that I believe the council's had historically, which really is a function of when you need 50 hours worth of work, but you only have 20 hours of attorneys. This would change that ratio a little bit.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I think we've discussed the general issue pretty much since we started meeting, and unless anyone wants to read the entire resolution, it's not long, but I think Solicitor Conley has described it well. I would move approval.
So we have a motion on the floor, unless we have any further discussion from the council.
I would like to second, and I'd like to point out to the council, if it is our decision to, as Malcolm mentioned, to kind of pull that funding line for legal counsel underneath the council's budget, it then becomes our responsibility to pay attention to those hours to make sure that we are not exceeding that budget. So I guess I'm just admonishing, I'm waving my finger at the council. Let's make sure we spend according to that budget. That's all I'm saying.
And with that being said, just keep in mind that we have two increases to the city council, one being legal.
And the other being the audit.
And the other being the audit.
Yes,
so make sure that's part of the discussion going forward in the workshop as well. Okay, so we have a motion, Councilman Morato.
Would that require an advertisement, as discussed earlier, for those increased line items for those departments?
If I'm not mistaken, it would. However, we haven't come up with a final number, so we have to come up with those numbers. So that's why I said keep in mind. So going forward in our workshop, let's get those numbers to something that we can agree upon. Okay, so we have a motion, and
I did second.
And we have a second on the motion as well. Roll call vote.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye. Next item, please.
Next item, no need to reconvene an executive
we
session,
don't.
so we're going to move to adjournment.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I move to adjourn.
We have a motion on the floor to adjourn. Second. Roll call vote.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morado.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye.
Did we